This morning we were looking at some tools related to interpretation, whether it was linking tangibles and intangibles, or dealing with the conflicts that and the controversy that seem to be part and parcel whenever we talk to an audience. Talk about how to bring what's out there a little bit closer to people, looking at that as a remote and abstract environment in some ways for a lot of us, unless you dive out in some of those places. So how can we interpret that and bring it closer into people? Those are ways that are going to help us do a better job of interpreting MPAs. This afternoon we wanted to spend a little bit of time on some training skills, because one of the hats you're wearing here, in addition to being an interpreter, is being somebody that trains and influences other interpreters. I'm kind of going on the assumption that when you get back, you have an audience at home, whether it's docents that work with you, or seasonal staff, or other staff members, that you're in a position to take what you've learned this weekend and help convey it to other people. And by conveying it to other people, I mean going beyond just telling them what you heard. I mean putting it into action, doing some training with them, so they're actually able to take this new knowledge, take some of these new skills, and actually put it into play. Yesterday, you learned a lot of great things about MPAs. We had some fabulous information. We got a good education yesterday. But at the end of the day, do you have any idea how all the rest of the people in the room are going to be able to take that home? And did we actually ever stand up and practice interpreting any of that information? No. We were all kind of the passive recipients of that. Happily so. But that's the difference, is now when we get back home, we actually have to take that and put it to use. And that's where kind of training kicks in. How do we actually go beyond just telling people stuff, telling our trainees things, and getting them to put things in place? One of the key skills in doing that is helping to coach people through the process of using that skill of interpreting, and then giving them effective feedback on how they're doing, so they can continue to improve that process. I need 6 volunteers. Here's one. We're going to come up here and have fun with this. Come on up, Jim. Okay, there's 4, 5. You gather around here.
Did you get more or less volunteers if you told us what we were doing?
Maybe.
Now these are our latest graduates from the guide training class here at Monterey Bay Aquarium. They've just been through 10 weeks of exhaustive training all about marine science in Monterey Bay. And we have given you all of the parts you need to go out there and start talking to our guests about just the wonders of Monterey Bay. In fact, I have all of your parts right here. This is everything you need to know to interpret Monterey Bay. Now, I'm being a good trainer. I know better than to just say, so go at it. You need to know what you're going to do. So each of you can take 6 pieces there. Help yourself. And then being talented interpreters who know how to put that information to use, go ahead and take those pieces of information you have and put them together so they make sense for our audience here.
Okay.
And don't let us hold it back.
changed.
Above the table. Yeah.
That's fabulous. And you can stand up, and you're certainly welcome to move a little bit closer to the front if you would like to see what we're up to here. So now, these folks have all the background data. They've been well educated. They know what they need to know. They've got all the pieces of information right in front of them. And now they're starting to put those pieces of information together to interpret to our guests. Are any of these arrangements the same? No. They're all different. So we could take all those different pieces of information. It's all the same pieces. You guys all have the same pieces to work with. But if I just leave you to your own devices, you come up with your own arrangement for that information. So we wound up with a variety of different messages, didn't we? Okay. And there's some beautiful messages here, but not a lot of consistency. For our audience, that could get to be a little confusing. But I haven't given you anything to go on. So in training, you can't just turn you loose with the information. You need to have more. It might be helpful if you had some idea of what the end was, what the outcome was that we were looking for. And it would be helpful if we all had a similar outcome, be more consistent messaging for our audience. So that's easy. I can give you a picture of what the final outcome is. So with that picture, you go ahead and rearrange your information a little bit so that we get a more consistent outcome.
Are we supposed to take all the pictures? Oh.
Grab things for. The outcome is number 4.
The outcome is number 4. Now another thing this kind of illustrates is that also just going on one learning style. If you can look at an image and you can decipher from that image how things ought to go together.
You're mimicking this, right?
Okay, I like this.
That's a beautiful message.
There's the ocean shells, there's cliffs, there's little...
Resisting change.
Shall we answer?
But see, our interpretive plan says that that's the message that everybody's going to get.
She's been interpreting for 20
You need to
years.
give
She's
us
not going
the
to change
right-
her ways.
Yeah.
The plan is wrong and needs to be addressed.
Well, then that's it. We can always look at just continuing the plan.
It's not a
But
See?
Yes, you
Team.
can.
I think I have more pieces than
Yeah,
I
wait.
started with.
I don't see
as my latest class of graduated docents, are you getting a little frustrated with the training here? I'm still not giving you what you need to be successful. Do a good job.
Yeah, what's up with that?
So, so maybe I need to do a little bit better job of kind of modeling what I want to see. So, let's do this. Let me I think you guys need a three-dimensional example of what this is. So, actually, to do this, I need you hold that, just like so. Oh. Yeah, one of the things I like about this is it, like so many other things in life, requires teamwork. Yeah, let's see.
Wait, how do you want my arms?
No, I've got it.
Okay. Yeah.
And
You almost had it. You turned it around. Yeah, no, one more.
this is
need to be
Where's that
6.
picture?
And to get rid of those preconceived ideas. We can do baby steps. That's good for now. There we go.
There. Oh, that
Nope.
show. Oh.
Still,
So close.
Looking out the window.
this is where training the trainer comes in.
Just make up a different one. Make a new one.
Yeah, pick a different one. How would we know?
Tell us it was right. We have to.
Right.
It's kind of a metaphor for how.
You know, what is the message?
What they go
We'll all be consistently wrong.
Even when we're the teachers, we don't know what we're doing.
Winter
It's
is
a
yeah.
sin, yes,
Some
yeah.
kind of rockfish.
We have 8
We're not laughing at you, Jim. We're laughing
Yeah, we're
at you.
up.
It works so well in the practice.
Does Jim almost have it?
Yes.
Jim's got it.
Jim's almost got it.
But it wasn't nearly as fun.
He'll have it down for the
Yeah,
second
Jim.
session.
All right.
One behind the scenes there.
I'll leave it out and later on. We'll touch it.
Visit the Lord left.
Yeah.
Nope.
I think you've done enough.
The way this works is with 2 sub-assemblies.
Does they go together?
And then the 2 sub-assemblies fit together seamlessly.
You've done it right.
Okay, so you have to learn how to do this, and you have to have many hours of practice.
So,
There's the
You value
Or call someone
This is a
else
really
to
good
come do the
lesson.
training.
Things don't go right.
You have 2 outlines.
so it goes together into one.
I have 2 lifelines. Use your lifeline.
It's almost there.
And he's got it.
Hey.
He's got it.
Look at it's a fisherman.
You don't get the rules, huh?
You did it, Ty. That's what
Yeah, no,
we're
it's
doing this
poured all
process.
the walks
So fishermen understand that you have to have electricity.
Well, that's right. Yeah, no, it has to go together in the 2 sub-assemblies. You can't slip in the last final.
But you're talking about a perfect world.
But, well, yeah, so many times in interpretation, if we get at least, 5 of the 6 parts together, we're doing the point in this.
Yeah, there you go.
There. Now, looking at, if you want to keep tinkering with this for a bit while I make some observations. The point is that so often we just hand everybody the pieces of the puzzle when we're doing training. And we don't show folks the end product and give them a real good idea, and I didn't either, but give them a real good idea of what the end product should look like and the steps to get from here to there. And that's where that whole kind of the modeling and demonstration piece is so critical, because you can't just take those pieces and assume you're going to get a consistent result. We got very inconsistent results, although beautiful. But if we want all of them to look like this, then some more energy and time needs to go into, and you need to have a competent coach that can put the puzzle together, into showing folks how all this comes together. And I've seen that over and over again in a lot, especially docent training. And since that's what I've done for years here at the aquarium, I'll pick on that. And I'll pick on the aquarium as an example. When I first came to work here, our volunteer training consisted of 10 weeks of going through all the pieces of the puzzle. Here is ichthyology and the habitats of Monterey Bay and some invert zoology and some physical oceanography. And at the end of 10 weeks, you're expected to go out and start explaining our exhibits. And in our exhibits, we really integrate all of that information. And in a lot of volunteer training, I see that, where we do a great job of handing all those pieces to folks. But then we don't go out and start practicing the interpretation piece of it. So some of that interpretive training might be the things that we just went through in the last few sessions, where we're talking about tangibles and intangibles and dealing with conflict and using objects to make that more relevant, to interpret resources that people can only experience indirectly. So we need to add some of the interpretive tools. Those should be other pieces that everybody gets. But then you still need to know how to put those pieces together. And that is going out and practicing interpretation. You can sit down. Thank you. And for our volunteers. So in that practice piece, folks need to have some experience working with the real audience. Practicing interpretation in the mirror or with your dog or cat is only going to get you so far. You need experience with a live audience. But that can be a little risky. It can be a little scary when you start to talk to a real audience. And for the organization, the sponsoring organization, it can be a little risky too. So, because you like to put a real polished, finished product out there to your audience. So, what are some of those midway steps? Putting volunteers, or could be seasonal staff, could be new interpreters. Once they've got the pieces and they've had a chance to watch some effective interpretation, they see what the final outcome is supposed to look like. And maybe they've worked on some bits and pieces of things. Maybe they've got some of the initial sub-assemblies together so that, I can't even put these together. So they've got some idea of at least what part of the process does. And bit by bit, you can keep adding in more pieces. And when we do training here, we create a lot of baby steps for new folks to get to the final piece. So once you finish with that class, we might make sure you've got a good handle on some of the pieces. Maybe you go out alongside an experienced interpreter. That might be one of our volunteer guides that does a great job. They can model good interpretation for you to emulate. And then maybe you start telling a few stories to the guests. Maybe you're standing right next to your mentor and they start to let you jump in and start to do a little bit of interpretation. And pretty soon you're adding more and more pieces to what you do. So before you know it, your mentor's way back there and you're so thoroughly engaged with the audience you didn't even see him step back and you're doing a fabulous job. That relies on the next piece beyond just effective coaching, and that's the whole feedback part of the process. We've been talking about feedback loops now for 2 days in this workshop. We've talked about all the monitoring that goes on in terms of getting feedback on the science of MPAs. And are these really paying off from a biology standpoint? The same kind of thing goes when we're interpreting MPAs. Feedback is crucial for the interpreters. And your role as a trainer is to a large extent providing that feedback. Not just turning people loose, but starting to give them some feedback as they start putting all the bits and pieces together. Let me ask you, what constitutes useful feedback for folks? We have something ready for here. And an easy way to relate to it is if somebody's giving you feedback, what makes it most valuable?
It's specific.
Okay, so it's specific.
Right. Instead of that sucked or something.
That was really poor. Try it again and do it better this time. Yeah, that's, you know, you put the piece together this way, not this way. The more specific that feedback can be, the more actionable it is.
Keep it positive.
Okay. It needs to be encouraging and empowering. And I always tell people, I wouldn't waste my time giving you feedback if I didn't believe that you can do a fabulous job with this. And I'm just helping you see how to take yourself there. So this was good, this is how it can be better. You've got a great strength at doing this, this is how you can build on that strength. If you improve this, it'll be as good as some of the other areas of the performance. So there's many ways to state things in very positive terms. I really dwell on this because when you're working, especially with volunteers don't have to worry about where their next paycheck is going to come from. They're there because of the joy of their role in your mission and your organization. The last thing you want to do is step all over that joy that they experience. But they do need feedback, and they deserve feedback. What else?
I think it has to be honest, because sometimes positive gets confused with sugar-coated, which nobody likes to be talked down to or fooled.
Mm-hmm. It needs to be honest and sincere. I'm going to add timely. Next week I'll tell you what I thought about that. What are you thinking about all week long? Okay. Brevity in terms of to the point and not kind of you need to have enough words though so people understand it, but then not to just keep elaborating.
Say relevant.
Relevant in terms of, again, kind of pertaining specifically to the
Whatever
task.
it is you observed and not, you know, you don't have some other hidden agenda that you're trying to work your way into. It's relevant to whatever you've observed.
Okay, so there's no other kind of hidden thing going on. That's good.
Along those same lines of brevity, but also brevity and maybe focusing on 2 or 3 things to improve upon, or 2 or 3, points that you're pointing out, as opposed to a whole laundry list of things that need to be done better. Or
I'm going to say 1 to 3 things. Yeah, what if I give you a whole list of things? Well, boy, this could be better. I wasn't quite happy with that. And pretty soon you get this whole list and like, I'm not even going to try. This just is not my cup of tea. This is not working at all. So what's the thing, and a good way to maybe a good question to ask yourself is, if this individual can focus on one thing to improve, what's the most important thing that would bring their entire performance up? And maybe just start on that. Or another way to filter it is, what's one thing that is very doable? What's the low-hanging fruit here? If this person can do this one thing, they're going to experience instant success. It's going to look better, it's going to feel better, and they're going to be motivated to continue to improve, and they'll experience the value of feedback. That low-hanging fruit may not be the most important thing, but it might be the most immediate success. And sometimes that's a good thing to focus in on people.
I think sometimes setting goals for where are we going next? What's our next step? Where are we headed?
And even objectives as very intermediate or immediate. And there should be a timeline on that too. Okay, so next week, let's give this a try again. We got our next campfire program coming up on the beach, and so you had a great story about this. I'd like you to make these changes in it, and let's try it again next week, and I'll give you, and then let's take another look at it.
New information. I mean, correct information or some kind of.
Okay, so.
something that you didn't think of.
So there may be.
Resources.
Yeah, they may need some more resources in terms of just accurate information, a little bit more information, so they do a more complete job.
That caused me to think about asking the person first what they thought, so they can give themselves coaching.
Yeah.
So there's a good recipe for laying this out. People should never be surprised with feedback. They should expect it, they should look forward to it, and they should have control over the process. So often I see feedback used, and I differentiate feedback and evaluation, where maybe you're forming an opinion and a value judgment about somebody's performance. Feedback is reflecting back to them, because you can't step out of your own body and observe yourself from the audience standpoint. Only another person can do that for you. So in feedback, when you can sit down and say, boy, I'd like to watch your presentation, you've done a great job with the initial parts on this, and I know you've been working on adding that next piece, can I see how it's going? What would you most like feedback on? What would you most like to know about how the audience perceives your presentation? So now Tama has control over the process. It's not me doing something to her, it's a tool for her use, and she has control over how that tool is used. That makes the process much more comfortable. And then as Tama was saying, let's say that I watched Tama's presentation in front of the Kelp Forest exhibit. How did that go? What's your own sense of what worked? What would you do differently next time? And I'm not going to say, what do you think was really bad about that, but what would you do differently next time that might even improve it? And what I'm doing is I'm giving her credit for knowing what works well and that she wants to continue to improve what she's doing. And again, she's in charge of her own performance now, and I'm just merely reflecting that. Okay, well, those are good ideas. I would sure agree with that. And I noticed also, when you started doing this, the audience started to get a little bit antsy. So I'm not saying that that's my opinion. I'm just, again, using very kind of objective observations. So what would you like to target next time based on this experience? Again, set those goals and objectives and kind of a timeline. And so you walk away from it knowing something more about how you're doing and knowing specifically what you'd like to do to improve it. And that you can continue. Well, I'm busy next Friday when you're here, but maybe there's another volunteer on your shift that could take a few minutes to watch your presentation at the Kelp Forest and have them look for those same things, so they can give you some good feedback on it. It's a time-consuming process, but if you start it out as part of the training, so that it's not, well, you've been here a year, it's time to see if you're still doing a good job. It's something that should be part and parcel of what we do, that you get feedback on a continual basis, and you give feedback to other people on a continual basis. It's part of the culture of excellence. None of us go to work in the morning saying, boy, I feel great. I sure hope I can do a mediocre job today. Time is short, and life is precious, and we want to make sure we're doing good things with every day. And feedback helps us achieve that goal. To know that we're always looking for better ways to do things, and that we reflect that back to each other. And I want to tell you, it feels good when you can tell somebody what they're doing well, and help them celebrate that, and maybe help them discover a couple of ways that they can even do it better the next time. That's really what feedback is about. It's a great tool, but unless you apply it correctly, it can be really intimidating and scary. And I know with a lot of volunteer programs, how many of you work with volunteers? Okay, so most of you can relate to this. How many of you have had somebody in your organization say, boy, shouldn't we be evaluating our volunteers? Shouldn't we be doing a better job of evaluating our volunteers? Wow, I saw a docent doing a walk the other day, and I heard a couple things that were a little bit different. And I mean, those things come up all the time, and yet we don't have a lot of resources to invest in constantly observing and providing feedback. But if it's part of the initial training, and indeed, if giving feedback is part of the initial training, you can start to set people up to coach and provide feedback for each other. And as long as you make sure people know what the standards are, they know where the hoop is, they can help each other clear that bar constantly. How many of you have docents, volunteers that help with the training and providing feedback for other volunteers? Excellent. Because to whatever extent you can get that going, then it's a much more efficient process. It doesn't mean that you're out there constantly doing the feedback part. And when you can get kind of peer coaching going on, so folks can provide feedback for each other, and you can ensure that they're meeting certain standards for performance, you've got a great system in place. It needs to be positive, and it needs to be empowering. And it's got to be present consistently. Otherwise, things tend to go back to pieces again over time. Whenever we do training with folks, when training is fresh in everybody's mind, then, you know, they're sharp, the information is right there, they're really excited about it, and a year later, things start to break down into pieces again. You need that kind of constant energizing. And always looking at what we do, how we can do it better, provides the energy and keeps you on an upward climb. It's been fun to watch it here keep burning for over 20 years. The downside is we're never quite entirely happy with what we do. The good part of that is it makes us always figure out better ways to do things. And that can happen even if it's you and half a dozen docents. You can have that same approach to things. In fact, you could probably do it even more efficiently. What is the most challenging feedback situation that you have dealt with? Anybody have one they want to share? Everybody's thinking, oh man, I've got, let's see. You don't have to use any names. We can, anybody have a staff member, a volunteer that is feedback proof? You don't have to put your hand all the way up. Okay. Any of you have a staff member or volunteer that is always full of feedback for you, but it seems to be a one-way process? It's hard to get anything back to them?
I do have one lady who has trouble, not trouble, clearing off historic areas and bringing in native plants. And the problem this person has is that to her, she was born and raised in Hawaii, and to her, every one of those plants is a living thing. And every plant has its own existence, just like you do and I do. And she can deal with some of the New Zealand spinach. That doesn't bother her too much. But some of the other plants, it's like you kill a pimpernel, you've murdered her cousin, in other words. And you're not going to be able to just jump over it with something like this.
That's kind of the botanic version of the right to life.
Maybe. Yeah, that might be correct. That might be correct. It's like, all it was is seaside poppy. Well, maybe not. Yeah.
And
But it's very cultural too. There's no, it's religious with it.
And that's, you know, sometimes in providing feed, and there it's a little bit different too. You're trying to shift somebody's values as well as just improve their own particular, their behavior, their performance on things. But it kind of goes back sometimes if you're in a real sticky situation, what is motivating the particular performance or behavior that I'm seeing right now? And sometimes that's a real important filter. This person is doing this because this is part of their background, part of their personality. This is a past experience they've had. And it's really kind of inhibiting your ability to have a real effective give and take current feedback. Some of those are difficult to get.
Well, if you say something that's not true, that can be adjudicated either way. But if you're trying to get somebody to change their cultural and religious perspective, you're asking them to change their own soul. And not every job is a good job match. Sometimes there's an issue.
I read into that. We have people here that just can't abide by the fact that we have animals in exhibits that they think every animal ought to be out there. They're never going to feel comfortable in this setting. This is not a good, and sometimes the feedback is, there's probably a better place for you. That's it. Boy, the sooner you can arrive at acting lines have saved each other a lot of trouble.
And I mean, we really have over the top kind of docents that volunteer for us. We have professors from Stanford, everybody, there's anybody from Silicon Valley, teachers, and they stay with us a long time. It's not uncommon to have a person that has been with us for 20 years. But one of our most difficult things to deal with is when Alzheimer's starts setting in. It doesn't happen all at once. It starts slowly.
The first sign is you forget how to.
We start noticing that the guide will take a group of 20 people out during the still season, and they won't say anything at all.
Yeah.
And they're still successful. It's a soft sell. We do expect more. And to approach somebody that's a physicist or a rocket scientist and say, you're leaving out some things in your exhibit program, is not exactly the way to approach it.
When the feedback is, wow, you're not cutting the mustard anymore. And a lot of us have volunteers, been with us for ages. They have been fabulous people. They are just treasured members of our community. And yet, time could be a cool thing. And 20 years ago, we were a fabulous docent, but boy, it's, I noticed that the information isn't quite there. And how do you have those kind of real difficult conversations and that kind of feedback? Feedback should always come from the point of being very respectful of the individual you're providing the feedback to. They need to know how much you respect them, how much you value their commitment and contribution to your organization, whatever you are doing. And that needs to be absolutely clear up front. And from there, you can say, because I hold you in such high regard, it seems like some of these you know, some of the performance I'm seeing isn't what it used to be. And it may be getting to the point where I'm concerned that I'm putting you out there in a position that may be costing you some respect from our audience. And the last thing I want to do is put you in any kind of situation that is going to detract from your dignity. And so again, you're not saying, boy, you know, you're just not as quick with the information as you used to be. You're saying something quite different. It's coming from a point of real respect in regard to that individual, which has to be absolutely genuine. And let them know out of that respect, you think that maybe they shouldn't be doing that activity anymore. And those are not easy conversations to have. The worst thing is not having those conversations.
Jim, I'm thinking kind of in this situation, maybe you shouldn't even, maybe it would be more respectful to actually, instead of giving direct feedback, you create an atmosphere that kind of enforces that respect, and maybe they can help train someone else with, you know, in their position. Mm-hmm. And so maybe you don't necessarily give them specific feedback saying, no, you're not doing this great, but you say, hey, we need to kind of start training the next generation of volunteers.
One of the things
you can get them, you know, to kind of maintain that you guys are great, you know, you're such a resource, we need you to spread your knowledge and continue this and kind of.
It goes back to what's the real motivation for this person to be there? And the motivation may be, I love this place, I love the people I work with, and I think this is a really important cause, I'm totally dedicated to it. And okay now, if I really listen to that, they still want to be here with us, they still want to contribute in some way. That gives me a lot of latitude now. Is there a way that that person can still be with us and they can still make an important contribution? One of the things that we've done here at the aquarium, and I stole this from campus when I used to teach, we had faculty that kind of retired from teaching but kind of didn't, that were emeritus faculty. And they had an office on campus, but they didn't have to advise students, and maybe they could devote time to just kind of pet research projects and those things. You could still contribute, but you didn't have to carry on a daily teaching load and doing the advising and all the other stuff that went with that. And boy, it was like nirvana for, you know, to get to that point, because you could cut out a lot of the campus BS you didn't like and just do the fun stuff. We've actually created emeritus volunteers here at the aquarium, where they're folks that they still get to come to all the parties and come to enrichments and still get to contribute in a lot of different ways, but they don't have to work a shift all the time. So if they were really starting to struggle, maybe physically or mentally, with all of the rigors of, you know, 3 hours at the touch pool and kelp forge and aviary, we could still meet their motivation, but start to give people permission not to engage in some of the rigor stuff.
It's easy for people who recognize that in themselves. For those who don't, it's more so.
Yeah.
And I think the point that this gentleman raised about passing it on is valid, but at the same time, some people may see that as a hidden agenda.
Oh, cool.
Jim's really trying to shunt me aside so that talent can take over. You know,
Yeah, no, and as I said, those conversations are always challenging, because no matter how much I know in my heart that I really respect that individual, you know, sometimes you walk away from that just at odds with each other. You still have to do what you have to do. I mean, your duty is to the mission of your organization and making sure everybody's contributing to that. And if in your judgment they are making less and less of a contribution all the time, then you can't ignore that. And you know, somebody where you may walk away feeling like you're never gonna speak to each other again, and a couple weeks later, you're like, boy, you know, I went home and licked my wounds for a while, and I realized that you did something very important for me, and it took a lot to do that, and I respect that.
Sounds like you kind of jumped over two things. Earlier you had said that feedback's not the same as evaluation, and this sounds like we're getting into evaluation. And you also said that feedback should sort of be coming from the person, and the person is wanting that feedback and growing from it. And so if that's true, then you're not evaluating, and that person is more willing to hear it because they're getting feedback.
Yeah.
Which is,
Yeah.
sounds like it's only a subset of evaluation, and whether you should hire or fire the person, that's a bigger picture.
Okay, so I did kind of jump the tracks there, thank you. The feedback, so let's say that there is a concern that somebody is, their information is off, or something isn't working right. I've also come up to folks and said, I haven't had a chance to catch one of your videos in a while. Would you mind if I sat in? Or, actually, somebody said the other day that they heard some information from you that just didn't sound quite right. And you've done such a fabulous job through the years, that doesn't make sense. Would you mind if I sat in and kind of hit out in the audience for a while in your next program? I always want to make sure that people know I'm there and why I'm there. And then half the time it's like, well, this sounds great to me. Or it's like, oh man, I can see what they mean. And the first step is going back and, wow.
Are you wanting them to ask for feedback, or you want to give them feedback?
Either way. Either way. And usually it's like, and as long as I'm sitting there, is there anything in particular that you'd like me to look for and observe to provide some feedback? Again, I always want the individual to be in control of that process. They don't have the option of saying, no, I don't want you to hear what I'm doing. It's like, well, boy, now I'm really a little bit concerned.
Jim, as you know, here we have well over 100 student guides that we bring in to the aquarium during the summertime, and it's the area I struggle the most in this feedback question. And specifically, sort of the opposite end of the Alzheimer's. Specifically, not in terms of the stories they tell or the information, whether it's accurate or not, because I think they want and respect feedback in that area. It's the issue of them not effectively engaging the public, and it goes to their personalities. And I just get have a really tough time with, look, you need to get out there, and because that, especially, some, for example, of our Asian students that come from a different cultural background have an especially difficult time of walking up to somebody and just engaging. So how do you deal with feedback in that kind of situation?
Yeah, and that behavioral, feedback on what somebody says is pretty cut and dry. Feedback on their behavior, on their actions, can be a little bit more challenging. And first of all, whenever you can define, this is what the behavior should look like. We want you to step up to our visitors, and when you're within 5 feet of them, you should look them in the eye and say, hi, welcome to the aquarium. We can kind of define those things, and you can make that more specific, but then it's still, if that's really anathema to somebody's, I can tell about a gumboot chitin, but I just can't look people in the eye because, in my upbringing, that's a real sense, that conveys disrespect for people. It's like, oh gosh, that's, how do I change that? And that is a challenge because we deal with people from a lot of different backgrounds. Sometimes kind of modeling that, well, if I make eye contact with you, does that seem intimidating? Or, in this culture, it's okay to do that. You can kind of work through that. You can role play it. You may or may not change a fundamental part of their background and their personality. And again, the feedback on that may help correct it, or it may be something that is deeper than that. And again, this may not be somebody's cup of tea. I mean, we arrive at that conclusion with some of our students every year. They're just, maybe 5 years from now they'll be ready for this, but right now they're not. Or maybe this will never be. Maybe they're never going to be an interpreter. That's okay. There are other things to do in life, not nearly as much fun as this. But, that sometimes that's the outcome. The thing is, good feedback will help people realize, wow, no matter how hard I try, this is hard for me, and I'm just not feeling successful at this, and I'm not sure that I can be successful at it. You don't want people to walk away feeling like they were a failure, but if they feel like they gave it a good try and you really helped them, and they've discovered that this is not their cup of tea, that is a success there. And when they arrive at that conclusion because you gave them good, objective, accurate feedback, and it's not you saying, wow, you know, you stink at this, you should do something else. When people reach that conclusion through some good feedback on their own, everybody parts company friends. The idea of feedback isn't to sort out, you know, who gets to stay and who needs to leave, but good feedback can really help folks start out good and get better and better and better. And I guess our goal in training, start people with basic pieces, show them where they need to go, kind of coach them to get there, and then through that ongoing feedback process, help them get there consistently and more effectively, and maintain that upward trajectory throughout their career just by continuing to polish what they do. The more you can enlist other people to do this, so it's not all on your shoulders, it gets easier and better to do all the time.